Jai Guru, everyone.
Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.
Hello. Welcome to the Autobiography of a Yogi, line by line Yogananda podcast. We are on chapter 12 and the final part of chapter 12, part 20. Today, we're going to hopefully finish this chapter. It's been a long journey. We've been doing it since February, so 4 months or so. Been a journey, 5 months nearly. Chris has enjoyed this long format digestion and regurgitation of this chapter.
20 hours on a chapter that otherwise would take you like an hour or so to read.
So, Lauren, do you want to just tell us where we are? What did we discuss previously?
We had a very fun episode last time, and we met a local magistrate who came into the ashram with a very high air of importance, and he came with a lot of pride and a bit of anger, and he tried to meet Sri Yukteswar in some metaphysical discussions, but ended up failing quite miserably and becoming an unlikely probationary disciple in the face of Sri Yukteswar's very calm, measured and truthful presence. So it was great to dive into that.
Thank you, Lauren. And that cool, calm, measured approach that Sri Yukteswar took in that example also applies in this next section, because here he talks about managing his own affairs and when he came under a bit of scrutiny, financial scrutiny. So it says here that Sri Yukteswar attended to all the details personally in the management of his property. Usually you have secretaries, lawyers, accountants, all that kind of stuff that manage these things, maintenance people. But Sri Yukteswar did that himself, and because he did that, you'd have unscrupulous persons, dodgy people that come and try and take away his ancestral land because it was worth a bit of money. I suppose it was. We've been there, Mike. It's in a nice plot of it's like a whole block as it were. So it's quite a nice bit of land, and it says that with determination and even by instigating lawsuits. Now this is quite interesting, isn't it, for us, because we have to take care of our own affairs, don't we? Financial matters and property and wills, and if we're inheritance, all this stuff we have to be very careful and mindful about. But it's interesting that an avatar such as Sri Yukteswar also had to go through this same kind of turmoil, because it's the least fun part of life, isn't it, pretty much?
I was thinking the same. I think that would have been the perfect opportunity to build up a disciple, teach them how to deal with the world, but he did it himself. Maybe we'll learn later in this part why this is so important to Sri Yukteswar. So maybe that's why he's dealing with it himself. The fact that he's doing lawsuits, like when I was first on the path, I was always thinking when you're spiritual, you refrain from all conflict, but that's not how life works. There's this in the spiritual diary somewhere, there's this sentence by Yogananda: "Don't let life beat you down, beat life." So you have to always be on top of things.
Yeah, we don't exactly know why this would have happened, with karmic, what karma is incurred here, whether it be people that have been surrounded by Sri Yukteswar and he's involved in some ways. But I personally have been going with my wife, been going through this for the last 3 years with buying land here in Brazil and everything that comes with. And at times it's torturous, it really is challenging. My wife often would say, what kind of karma would I have to go through this? And, she would be kind of throwing her hands up in the air. But I'll share this paragraph with her to show that, look, no matter how evolved we are, no matter how much karma we manage to burn, we will still have things to go through. So it's reassuring to read this in some way.
I think it's rather the more karma you burn, the bigger chunks you get. That's kind of what I see people sometimes facing.
So if you're climbing Everest, that means it just keeps going up. It keeps rising and rising, and never you never see the summit.
Ever in the name. Right?
Oxygen becomes literally zero, but still no summit. But Chris, are you, about the karma point, are you suggesting that Sri Yukteswar is burning through some karma that he had developed in his present life? Because we obviously know that he's free, essentially, being an incarnation.
No, not really. I mean, that's why I sort of opened by saying we don't know why this happened. It is curious, of course, but I imagine it's to do with, the people around him. He's some form of a filter or something for it. We know that our gurus take on karma for us. So, we don't know the intimate details about these lawsuits and the issues that he would have had in these ways, but relating it to my own experience, and my wife immediately said it must be because of my karma, why I'm going through these struggles. So, I very much imagine Sri Yukteswar is beyond these things, but obviously still gets embroiled in them somehow.
I thought in your specific case, Chris, it would have been your fault because you're, as the Americans would describe you, an alien to the country of Brazil, and they don't want you to own land and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I need to pay. I've got penance. Yeah. I imagine, though, how Sri Yukteswar manages this situation is very much different to how many of us would, which is we toil and sort of struggle and suffer a little bit more, and maybe, without the wisdom that Sri Yukteswar would have no doubt had to go through it. So going through it, I think, is kind of irrelevant. What's relevant is how we are able to process these things, I imagine. So it's probably the biggest difference.
Our stock go-to response to the question, I wonder why he went through this, is of course for us to learn the lesson, isn't it? And we're the four of us have employed ourselves. We're self-employed in aspect of trying to glean as much as we can from the minute details into teachings. And listeners, hope you're with us as well on this journey. You can always comment on things that we've no doubt missed. Mike?
Those are interesting details that you go through, and we see this with Yogananda as well, especially in America, all the troubles he faces here and there and how he deals with them. And I think that's also for us to know, when we read in the Bible about Jesus, I'm sure he had his fair share of troubles there, but it's hard to relate to them because it was so long ago and the world was so different back then. So this is more like a contemporary example of an avatar living in the world.
In the next sentence, it does actually say that Sri Yukteswar had desire, and that's why actually does say he underwent these painful experiences from a desire. Ergo, there is a consequence to desires in this life, because he never wanted to be a begging guru. So maybe we've just sort of stumbled into the answer to some extent, that there may have been another path, maybe lesser resistance. I don't know what you guys take from that, but there's obviously a price to pay for these, to not be this begging guru. He was taught by his mother, I believe. That's how the story goes.
So that is a good point. That his mother, he did have some influence in even this respect, as we learn from Swami Satyananda's book, I think, as well, on this matter. But this next line that Chris talks of from Sri Yukteswar's desire never to be a begging guru or to be a burden on his disciple. The deeper question is why? Why didn't he want to be a begging guru, and why didn't he want to be a burden on his disciple? Because usually in ashrams, disciples take care of all these matters that are, you know, trivial essentially in terms of the larger landscape, and the guru is therefore then free to work on the more important things. Chris?
Yeah, the burden to his disciples, it says, or a burden to his disciples. So the twofold nature of this desire that was maybe given to him, passed on to him by his mother, and then the burden to his disciples. So the guru takes on that burden, that karma of his disciples. So his disciples benefited; they were the benefactors of this karma that he took on through these painful experiences.
I wonder also if he was serving to be an example of another type of guru and saints, because you know there's quite a common theme where those who are saints and great ones are often poor and begging for their next meal, or having to rely fully on God in that way. But here we have another avenue where he's standing quite firm and showing us, you can manage your affairs and be very stable, right? And still own land and go to court and know God. You don't have to be sitting in the mountain begging for your next meal. So yeah, I feel like it really shows us another example of how we can live in the world.
The other point here is that never to be a begging guru. Now, there's a concept in Hinduism called bhiksha. Bhiksha means essentially to, request alms, and it's not just in Hinduism, it's in Jainism and Buddhism. And the concept is that a renunciant is forced to go through this kind of demeaning sort of role of being a beggar, as in terms of conquering your own ego and self-effacement, until all that's left is your true self. You've realized yourself. But Sri Yukteswar did not want to he didn't want to go through that, and I don't believe he didn't ask any of his disciples to do this bhiksha process either. So that's an interesting parallel that Sri Yukteswar didn't employ. That is still very much part of the culture of Eastern spirituality. So that's an interesting point there. And it says that he essentially outwitted every single opponent, which is quite cool. It would have been cool to have some details on that. There is some details actually in Swami Satyananda's book on that, but you can go on that and on the biography of Sri Yukteswar. So says that his financial independence was one of the reasons why the alarmingly outspoken master was innocent in matters of cunning, in the cunning matters of diplomacy. Mike?
Sri Yukteswar must have been an amazing personality to be around. I don't even want to imagine what it's like to just have Sri Yukteswar file a lawsuit against you and having him on the other side of a big conflict. I don't think this would go well for one. So, but it's another point I was trying to make is that I feel like he's one of the trailblazers here for this new kind of spiritual guru who is kind of more apt to be a guru in Dwapara Yuga, who is financially independent and not really relying on like his disciples all being happy in the hermitage, but who can really run the kind of regime that he wants to.
So do you think nowadays if he was around, then he'd have like NVIDIA shares as part of his
portfolio? Absolutely.
Yeah. So if someone listens to this 10 years when NVIDIA no longer exists, they've gone bankrupt, they're going to be
this might age badly. This might age really badly. Yeah.
These guys going on about. Or it could be like prophesized if they're the next Apple. Well, no, they already are. They'll be gone. Anyway, we digress. Unlike teachers who flatter their supporters, which is essentially saying that some gurus have to kind of play the game in terms of flattery and just, you know, for financial security, I suppose, and secure donations. And I always it's always funny when you have like some temples, I know, like they welcome certain personalities, whether it's like if it's a big temple, a prime minister or a president may come, and regardless of whether or not they're the right fit to be like a guest of honor in your organization, they have to be welcomed when, you know, the red carpet has to roll out, because it's such a great opportunity to, you know, secure your reputation and get more funding and, you know, get all that. So here it's kind of saying that Sri Yukteswar was not in that category, and we saw that in the previous section where, like, you know, the judiciary, the court official that came, the judge, was he a judge? He came, and Sri Yukteswar did not care who it was. He's going to carry on, and if it doesn't fit his mold in terms of what he expects and who he would invite and who he would liaise with and rub shoulders with, then it didn't matter, did it?
I like Sri Yukteswar was really going through the different categories of people that he's not going to be influenced by. You know, we had, you know, men and women he treated exactly as the same. We've had people of influence like the magistrate, and now we have those with great wealth, and still he's just completely even. Such a great example, isn't it?
Yeah. And that wealth point, yeah. So it says that he was impervious to the influences of those with whether open or subtle, you know, the wealth of others. So that's a nice and important point as well for organizations today. They don't really do this, do they? They've got to be in the game in terms of making money and or staying afloat. I don't know how. SRF is actually quite good at this. I remember we wanted to, I can't remember what the scenario was, but I wanted to welcome someone. Some scenario happened where I wanted to use some fame of some other person or something along those lines to like magnify London Centre in some way, and then it was a really good opportunity, and it went to Mother Centre, and I forget the specific details, but they essentially said that this is not our purpose. You know, we'll go at our own pace. We're not going to dilute the teachings and be associated with X, Y, and Z just for the purpose of a short-term gain. You know, we're in this for the long haul. And I thought that was so refreshing, isn't it? It's not all about growth and followers and all that kind of stuff that it seems to be with most organizations, whether spiritual or otherwise.
Yeah, I guess it has to come from the celebrity themselves, right? With that, you wouldn't ask for their endorsement. If they do it, like I remember famously, like Steve Jobs, he mentioned Yogananda and Autobiography, and also Virat Kohli, the cricket player. There was this Instagram post. So I think people do it, but I don't think SRF asked them to do that. That's just something that happens.
And they wouldn't then, like with Steve Jobs and with Virat Kohli, they wouldn't put that endorsement on the center of their webpage. True. It would be like a subtle thing. Like, for example, Awake, you know, the Awake film, they had a little video where someone mentioned Steve Jobs, you know, liking Yogananda and the Autobiography of Yogi. So that's like a very indirect approach, not like front and center in your face endorsement as they could do, and they could probably utilize it to increase the following, but they don't do that because in some ways there's a bit of risk, isn't there? Because, for example, if in the future, say Steve Jobs is found to have been doing something weird and SRF have got him on the center of their webpage, and they'll take him down and apologize, so they don't go through that whole They don't need to go through that, which is a good way to do things, isn't it? Regardless of it potentially slowing things down for us in terms of our growth and spreading the Guru's teachings. Because part of I can't remember if it's like one of the oaths or one of the things that you commit to, but part of our thing is to not just practice the teachings, but to, as much as possible, influence others and share the teachings. So it's like it's subtle, isn't it? You can't, we don't, SR is not an organization that goes out on the streets and hands out books, but subtly we can, give our friends the Autobiography of Yogi and things like that.
Yeah, the story of Elvis springs to mind, where Elvis, one of the biggest names in history, in the entertainment industry, was rejected, from his advances of, I think, asking to become a career band, I think, at the time. And that you could flip it on its head. There are obviously potentially many reasons why he was at the time. You could flip it on its head to your point, Priyank, and say the opportunity was there to, take advantage of the situation, and maybe many institutions would have done that just to try to get a name there and promote it in some way, but more of a shameless way. So yeah, it is such a great backbone in the organization to have. Sri Yukteswar is sort of leading from the very front here.
Yes, indeed. So the next section is that in the same paragraph is that he didn't ask for money, and essentially that his training was given free to all disciples, which is what a fantastic and wonderful position that Sri Yukteswar got himself in. Right?
I guess that's also why the bar, there's a little bit of a bar before he accepts you in his ashram, right? Because people might just go there to just be there and not really do the training. So it's like, sounds like it's a bit of an all-inclusive hotel over there. So you have to first prove yourself worthy, I guess.
Freeloaders, Mike, you can say it. So now we get to the crux of this section, where someone from the courts once came to the ashram to serve some legal summons. Sounds ominous. And a disciple named Kanai and little Mukunda, Paramahansa Yogananda, ushered the man into Sri Yukteswar's presence, and his attitude was offensive, apparently. It will do you good to leave the shadows of your hermitage and breathe the honest air of a courtroom, he said contemptuously. I don't know if my enactment was contemptuous enough, but I'm sure it was. I'm sure it was worse than this. I can't do contemptuous. I'm not a good enough actor. Lauren, you can do it. Go on, do it contemptuous.
No, my acting days are over.
It's not over.
I gave that up.
Chris, go on, contemptuously.
Contemptuous. I mean, I think you did a great job, Frank.
You can't just say, Mr. Sri Yukteswar, you've got served.
And it must have been very contemptuous, because Mukunda couldn't contain himself, and this is really not in keeping. If there's one line in the whole autobiography of a yogi that you would not expect Mukunda or Paramahansa Yogananda to be associated with, it is this, which is another word of your insolence and you will be on the floor. It's just insane, isn't it? I just can't imagine a younger version of our guru, but Mukunda ever saying this, and he said it threateningly.
It's a bit strange that this happens, right? Because isn't the court supposed to be an how do you say that, like an arbiter, who is someone who is not on either side? Somebody filed a lawsuit against Sri Yukteswar and somebody serves you the court order, fair enough, but that doesn't mean you have to do it with an attitude. So the whole scene seems a bit strange, and this kind of court officer is a bit out of line, I would say.
You know, just whenever you said that line, Priyank, about Mukunda saying that you'll be on the floor. I mean, that is shocking, really, isn't it? But whenever you said it, you know, Harry Potter scenes struck into my mind, and just when you're saying about the contemptuous thing, could you imagine, you know, Lucius Malfoy saying the previous lines, you know, it will do good to leave the shadows of your hermitage. It's a very Lucius Malfoy kind of contemptuous line for Harry Potter. So there you go. If you wanted some kind of imagery, you could use that.
I remember actually either Harry or Ron threatening Lucius in this way. So yeah, good good example. J.K. Rowling has been certainly influenced by the Autobiography of Yogi. Oh wow, what a great comparison. Well done, Chris. So here the next section is Ganai also was shouting. He said, and in you know less, he essentially said virtually the same thing and called him a name and said essentially these are blasphemies. How dare you bring this to our sacred space in this ashram? And so Ganai and Vakunda essentially ganging up on this now you might say poor court deputy, because Sri Yukteswar also felt a little bit of sympathy for him. Lauren?
It's kind of I don't know what the word is, but you know, Kanai, he's like, you know, saying, "Oh, how dare you bring your blasphemies?" and he's shouting right at this man, and you know, Mukunda's really riled up too. But in some way, like that's the opposite behavior for the ashram in a lot of ways, and they've sinned throughout this whole like time. Sri Yukteswar being so calm, but I guess when you're faced with someone threatening your beloved guru, and although you know there's little latent seeds within you, they're still there. They would definitely come up to the surface. So it's not surprising, but it is interesting how there's a bit of a difference between the two.
I think it also helps that two of your disciples already overreacted on your behalf, and you kind of have to stop them. And then in combination, the three sent the right message to the officer.
You know, the next line of Sri Yukteswar jumping in to protect the abuser, as it was said, like, don't get excited over nothing. This man is only doing his rightful duty. What do you guys think? Do you think this is actually sort of teaching us that really their actions were truly incorrect? That their, what would you say, maybe pride kind of took place of respect in someone, that they actually got ahead of themselves and reacted in this really quite negative way, that Sri Yukteswar is stepping in literally in the middle of them, saying, you know, you've got to correct your actions. Because part of me kind of thought, well, you know, good on them for stepping in. Sri Yukteswar really saying, no, you know, you're getting excited over nothing.
Were you, when people were fighting on the playground, Chris, were you the boy on the side like riling everyone up with the wolf calls and stuff?
I've been known to sort of actually separate fights.
Oh, separate. You know. I thought you were going to say yes.
No,
separate.
I've got some stories, but maybe after the podcast.
Stay tuned for the bonus episode.
Nice. I don't know if it was really wrong what they said, and I don't really think he was scolding them. I think it was more like he was trying to find the right tone for to communicate. I think if those two would have kept silent, then he would have had to push back on the officer and tell him that he's out of line. I don't think Sri Yukteswar was ever a person who was holding back with anything. He wouldn't have gotten that excited. He would have said it in a very calm manner, say something that would have been very much on point and very eloquent, I'm sure.
Ice or iron, like.
Yeah.
Those are the two options.
For his war chest, yeah, like his weapons.
I would imagine a bit more iron in this instance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It wasn't very hot and heavy. You know, the abuser, came in very sort of cold and contemptuous. So maybe he would have greeted him with some iron himself. So yeah, I would have enjoyed seeing his response. But this is quite entertaining as well to read.
I would have thought ice actually in this one, because he's turning the like anger and emotions down. And Mike makes a good point about it not necessarily being wrong, because here, you know, in a few paragraphs ago, it says Sri Yukteswar outwitted every opponent. So maybe this is just a theory, but they were doing an enactment of good cop, bad cop, and
Exactly.
the two boys were being the bad cop, and hence then we have Mukunda has a get out clause in our minds where he would never say these things, but they might say it as an act to ward off the official, because it says the officer, dazed at his varying reception, respectfully offered an apology and sped away like a meek little
You added that bit in, didn't you?
meek court official, because because he can, if he is a court official, he can match the aggression in a sense, because he's got the whole weight of the law behind him. And usually officers will basically listen to everything that his version of the story, and if he's acting out of his legal capacity, then he'll know that, you know, these boys are just, you know, boys essentially. Who knows?
Well, it kind of showed the weakness of his resolve. Came in with very firm, strong words, but actually upon a couple of boys kind of shouting at him, he fell apart pretty quickly. So he had no resolve in his actions and in his mind. And he crumpled pretty quickly, didn't it?
Indeed. So let's go to the next paragraph now, which is really more about Sri Yukteswar in terms of how soft he was in some respects and how firm he was in other respects. So here it says that it was amazing. Mukunda found it amazing to see that Master had such could be so fiery within, and so fiery and so calm essentially at the same time. And it says that he fitted the Vedic law, which is a man of God, which is softer than the flower where kindness is concerned, stronger than the thunder where principles are at stake. Very nice. I think I've got the latter part nailed, I think, but the former part, the softer than a flower where kindness, I need to really
very kind, Priyank.
Really work on that.
You are.
Could be much more so. There's work to be done, but the thunder I can do. It's gentle thunder though, I must add.
It's interesting, this really. And I do have somebody very close to me like this, and what I can say is that it amplifies both. You know, the kindness. You know, yes, it's very, very soft, but actually, because you can see the duality in them, it actually makes it more significant for me, whatever they are, kind, because you've seen them when they're thunderous. You know, sometimes you have somebody who's only one thing, and it kind of weakens that thing that they are. But, you know, so it's a very good trait, really, isn't it? To be able to switch both.
Best of both, isn't it? Best of both. So next paragraph is there are always those in the world who, in Browning's word, and Browning is Robert Browning, who is a poet, English poet that was around just before Guruji's time, actually. And it says here that there are always those in the world, essentially, in quotes, who endure no light, being themselves obscure. There are always those in the world who endure no light, being themselves obscure. Does that, I'm again a bit confused by this poetry. Does that mean that there's some people that can't see even the light if it's right in front of them, you know, the light of wisdom or the light of God perhaps, or the intuition or conscience, because they've wrapped themselves in obscurity through various phases or aspects of their lives?
Mm.
I think the way I read it was that they have a hard time being with the light, and they remain in the shadows, and that's probably because they have inner pain. And then I feel Sri Yukteswar has, like most avatars, like a very compassionate stance towards them, and tries to be someone who is understanding, but he's still firm. I think one story that the one we had in the last chapter, where we had this magistrate come in very rudely talking, but then in the end becoming a disciple. This might have been an example of many people. I can see something like this happening with Sri Yukteswar often, with the way he acted with people, but also the kind of people that came to him that maybe he attracted. I don't know.
I have no idea, so I asked ChatGPT, and it's interesting response. Do you want to hear what it says? Because it's quite it seems on point. It says the phrase "endure no light," being themselves obscure, suggests that individuals or things that are not prominent or well known, obscure, do not attract attention or scrutiny, endure no light. In other words, those who remain in the shadows or are not in the spotlight avoid the exposure that comes with visibility. This can imply that by staying out of the limelight, they avoid the challenges and pressures that come with being noticed or famous.
So I suppose in the context of the Autobiography of Yogi, it's not necessarily about fame. It would probably be more about spiritual growth and you know, putting yourself under the microscope of guru scrutiny.
Yeah, maybe I need to read on here a little bit in the next sentences, but I would have tied that into the, you know, the issue that Sri Yukteswar is having is that he is in the limelight. He is actually in society, you know, people are coming to him. He's quite well known. So whether you call that famous or not, I don't know. So I would have taken that to apply that by nature of putting yourself out there, you're going to have, you know, clashes with this world in some way, shape, or form. And Sri Yukteswar is sort of, he's going through that whilst being this softer than a flower, stronger than thunder type character.
Yes, perhaps. So the next sentence is that sometimes an outsider would have some imaginary grievance and they'd be caught up in it, and they would perhaps even have the courage to berate Sri Yukteswar. And Mukunda says that the interpretable guru would listen politely, analyzing himself to see if any shred of truth lay within the denunciation, which seems to be like the best definition of being a humble and having humility, isn't it? And really taking every bit of feedback, criticism, or whatever it is, and actually analyzing it objectively. Seems like it's a really good way to live our lives, because we're obviously not always correct and not always right. And here, if Sri Yukteswar is adopting this attitude, then he himself suggesting that he is also employing this method, which is certainly something that we should also do. And we had a couple of examples in this chapter where Sri Yukteswar went through this, with young Kumar, that disciple, and then also that incident where Sri Yukteswar, complained to Mukunda's father, Bhagavati Charan Ghosh, that he was trying to essentially be a bit too forceful with trying to influence someone spiritually. And then he kind of, in both those instances, came backwards, and he lived this, this truth, to see if there was any truth, and then he went back, and apologized essentially. So it says that these scenes would bring to mind one of Master's imitable observations, which is, in quotes, "Some people try to be tall by cutting off the heads of others." So there's two types of feedback then, isn't there? Whether it's constructive or otherwise. There's ones where it is not constructive, and that's what this is really referring to. Some people try to be tall by cutting off the heads. Some people try to be tall by cutting off the heads of others. So this is where people are really essentially taking you down just for their own purposes, and that's obviously not necessarily something that you should entertain. Certainly not something that you should allow to happen to yourself.
I think that's what happened with the court officer, right? He had this position of power that, in my opinion, is an impartial, your duty is to be impartial if you work for the court. But that's not what he was. He used this position to make himself something higher. He probably, very much like the magistrate in the last part, he was expecting respect. And then when he came in and said that Sri Yukteswar should see the free air of a courtroom, he kind of thought that this would inspire fear in Sri Yukteswar and everyone, but it caused quite a strong reaction that made him walk off. But I think he really just said that to feel good about himself. He was gonna go there, make them fear him, and then leave and feel good about himself for the rest of the day. I think that was his plan.
Yep, and that didn't work. But
no.
Do you not think it's a insane existence that some people that practice this means of getting what you want, how they live? Because we know that this approach would incur such a debt of karma, right? And it's really, really not worth the temporary gain of whatever it is that you're achieving. It's not worth it. And it's not even necessary that you need to see the whole the karmic picture of, and understand the spirituality. Most people will feel the conscience and the guilt after an occurrence such as this, and then they just suppress it, right? They just put it to the back of their minds and just carry on. But if they just listen to that conscience and guilt, then perhaps then they wouldn't have other issues. There's not even you don't need to be read in the Vedas and understand all these the definitions such as this, softer than a flower where kindness is concerned and stronger than thunder where principles are at stake. You don't need to read wherever this is from. It might be the Upanishads, or I don't know actually where that line was from. If listeners know, please get in touch. I did try and find it, but my point is you don't need to be well versed and well learned to understand the influence of how you interact with others and how it might negatively impact you in the short, medium, and definitely in the long run. But it's just sad that it's so commonplace. I've experienced this in the workplace, and also with just generally, sometimes in friendship circles as well. You even get this in friendship circles. It's crazy what egos and power trips and all that kind of stuff can do. Pride as well. It's really sad, isn't it? And all we can do is pray, I suppose. Pray for them.
Parag, you said, what examples would we have for this off call? And I was thinking, oh God, I actually probably have too many to count. And it's actually quite depressing, really, to think, if you just think about all the instances where actually the guilt is on my side as well, for sure, to one degree or another, throughout my lifetime. It's happened. Probably, they're not flooding to my mind, but for sure, I think those without sin cast the first stone here, really. But I think on the flip side of that, we probably have lots of examples where we try to pick ourselves up and lift other people up, and in doing so raises us up. And I would much rather talk about those examples. And I remember one example, when I was a kid, when I was 10 years old, I was good at track and running and things. And, it's a competition. You're in sports days, you're competing against, your peers. As a kid, I remember distinctly where and when I was taking my nearest competitor to them aside and saying, look, if you run like this, I gave him some little technique that I was doing, it makes you faster. And obviously this technique, it may or may not actually help. I remember like a teacher coming over and really, sort of congratulating me for that little moment. I just remember so distinctly, it stuck in my mind because it was just sealed in my mind, like this is the way to be, and that's just a better way. Try to raise everybody else up, and in doing so, you raise yourself. And those examples, hopefully we all have some of those in the memory bank.
Then did you realize that? Then did it turn out that you were now running the same speed as everyone, as opposed to ahead of everyone, giving away the trade secrets?
Best intentions were, I probably made it worse. I probably made it worse.
Made him slower. Hey, that's not actually the best way. Actually, let me cancel that. No, but that's a really lovely story. Actually, that's nice, simple one. Thank you for that. So the next paragraph is really just giving us more texture on how lovely our guru, our paramguru is. The sentence says that the unfailing composure of a saint is impressive beyond any sermon. And there is a sermon quoted here from the Proverbs, which says that he that is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he that ruleth his spirit, that he that taketh a city. I read that correctly. He that is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he that ruleth his spirit than he that taketh a city. So this goes back to the adage, conquering yourself is much more valuable than any number of stories such as Alexander the Great. But yeah, Mike.
Yeah, Guruji says that in many places that whenever there's those inspirational quotes always where people say you cannot control what happens to you. You can only control the reactions that you have. And Guruji mentions that often, that you should, before you have an angry reaction, you should maybe count to 10, or there's this funny talk by Ananda Moy where he says, then count to 100 if 10 is not enough, because those are really the moments that can be deciding the future of a friendship or the future of something, right? And words is something you cannot take back, and in the emotion is always very strong, and it's very difficult. I don't think all the avatars would write about this if this wasn't very hard. This is a really high ask.
The line again, the unfailing composure of a saint is impressive beyond any sermon. The composure could be referring to so many different facets of Sri Yukteswar's portfolio of traits, pieties. And here it's saying that all of those are impressive beyond any sermon, essentially saying that having a guru such as Sri Yukteswar and just being with him is more important than any sermon, any Bible or any Gita or any scripture could give, isn't it? Which is quite nice, because like as it, the proof of the pudding is in the taste, right? So you may have all the scriptures, but when you're with Sri Yukteswar or Paramahansa Yogananda, you actually get to taste the actual elixir, which is the impact, or someone who's embraced the teachings and the sermons and realized them rather than just reading them, which is what I read in that line, which is quite nice, especially when we read, Guruji's talks, or we hear his voice talking about various things, which is rare to hear his voice in so few recordings, but we should treasure and value the ones we do have. So the next paragraph is that Mukunda often reflected that Sri Yukteswar could have been an emperor or a world-shaking warrior had his mind been essentially centered towards those pursuits, but instead he chose to calm those storms and those inner citadels of wrath and egotism. And it says those whose fall is the height of man. So it's lovely to hear Sri Yukteswar being described in such high praise, isn't it? It's so inspiring.
I love the word chosen here as well. I feel like it's so revealing. It's not as if through that word it suggests that we have the choice, right? The free will to decide how we spend our lives and what we pursue. And that, because we read about these great ones and great saints, and it's easy to say, oh yeah, well they had the good karma, and they're an avatar. So, and while that's true, but it kind of reminds me, like, actually no, we have the choice, and life is what we make it, but we have to put the effort into the avenue that we want, right? So yeah, I love that word, chosen.
Good pickup, Lauren.
And I think we've mentioned it before, but the quote, "The meek shall inherit the earth," and the true sort of analyzing of that, those who don't glorify themselves and who are humble in spirit and who are warriors but choose to keep their swords sheathed. That's that is essentially what this is as well, right? Yeah, thank God for that as well. How many people would be out there but for the choice in making the world a much worse place rather than what Sri Yukteswar is doing?
Yes, and interesting that he says that he could have been an emperor or world-shaking warrior, because if he had chosen those pursuits in India in that time, then you might say independence from British rule may have been secured some decades beforehand, with a Sri Yukteswar at the helm of the independence movement. But yes, there were bigger fish to fry, I suppose, in terms of the souls of man as opposed to the humanity in terms of the whole of the population. But yes,
maybe in some ways he laid the groundwork for independence later. Hard to know.
I'd love to see the arc of that dotted line analyzed, but beyond the scope of this podcast. So this, in some prints of this autobiography of a yogi, this there's also a picture in this chapter, a picture of the Serampore center and the meditation temple that's there right now, that was dedicated in 1977. Again, that's just in some prints. And in that picture, if you look closely, you can see a rugged looking wall with tall overgrown trees on the right. And that is where Sri Yukteswar's ashram was originally and where it is currently in its current derelict state. But let's just, Chris, can you read out what's in the caption of this picture?
Swami Sri Yukteswar Meditation Temple, dedicated in 1977, on site of his ashram in Serampore. Several bricks from the original ashram were used in its construction. The temple architecture is patterned after a design by Paramahansa Yogananda.
Certainly is very much in the design of most SRF and YSS temples, isn't it? It's one of the great temples in India, SRF YSS temples, just a stone's throw away from the Dakshineshwar temple in Calcutta. Very nice temple to visit, very small meditation room, but what it lacks in size, I think it makes up for in the fact that its holy vibrations being on the grounds and being built from the very bricks that the Sri Yukteswar's ashram was made of. And Brother Vishwananda, when he was here last year, told us of the great news that they've now purchased the land, that whole block that Sri Yukteswar's ashram was on, and they will essentially rebuild the ashram exactly as it was. They've got enough photos and video footage from when Richard Wright was there in 1935 with Paramahansa Yogananda, when he went to see Sri Yukteswar before his last few days and years, I suppose. And so they're going to use all of that material and recreate the ashram exactly as it was, and how lovely it will be to see that. And he also emphasized that the original temple, the original ashram, was completely locked down by the family, and so nothing of the original building remains, but apparently the existing foundations of the old temple, old ashram, were still there, so they will reuse those bricks and dirt and use that to build some parts of the new structure, and hence hopefully retain some of those holy vibrations for us all to enjoy for generations going forward. But there's cool, seeing as we're going to talk about the picture, there's a cool story behind this ashram, because it was Sri Yukteswar's ancestral land, as we well know. And if you read Swami Satyananda's biography of Sri Yukteswar, it's written in a bit more detail about the establishment of this temple. And this city is in Serampore, or town is Serampore, but the ancient name is Sri Rampur. And the story which we're about to kind of just briefly touch on kind of has the seed ideas of like how our organization is named, and how the influence of like the kind of the pillars that make up the philosophies of our and the principles of our organization. So watch out for that. But apparently the Sri Yukteswar used to have a Gita Sabha, which was basically what we may call a Gita reading class. But Gita Sabha in his case would be led by Sri Yukteswar. And one such occasion, when he was holding one of these, there was a very eminent saint called Sri Motilal, who came to visit, and he was a disciple of an eminent disciple of Lahiri Mahashaya, and he was also very good at organizing and other things like that. And he essentially was responsible for a lot of what happened in terms of the rebuilding of the whole place to the ashram that we will see built and what was there. So do you want to Mike, read out this little section of the Swami Satyananda's biography of Sri Yukteswar?
Swamiji transformed his large 2-story building in Serampore into an ashram, naming it Priyatham. Work management, propagation, gathering people, etc. The responsibility of all matters were put upon Motilal. Through the skilled Motilal's care, Priyatham matured into a vital work and spiritual center. We heard Sri Yukteswar say, at the root of these fellowships and congregations is Moti Babu. If it weren't for him, none of these organizations would happen. With the intention of having a non-sectarian designation, the Sabha was named Satsanga Samaj. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Yep.
It was written in the mission statement. The universe, Brahmanda, pervading source of all. The Brahman substance, reality has been named by luminary sages as truth. The goal of attaining the company of that universal truth substance, along with providing an environment for sadhana matters, comprises the mission of this institution.
So a couple of things you should have seen from that it was called, firstly it was called Priyadam. So we know his Sri Yukteswar's name was Priyanath Karar, and Priyadam means abode, or like a planetary abode. So Priyadam was what it was originally called, but then after this reorganization into this ashram, a formal ashram, it was called Satsang Samaj. And in India, the translation of self-realization fellowship into the Indian languages is Yogoda Satsang Society, and society is also similar to Samaj, and so Satsang Samaj is essentially, these are the roots of our organization. So Sri Yukteswar really is at the root of not just the principles which Mike read out at the end, which should have sounded very, very familiar to like the goals and the mission of self-realization fellowship. It didn't start with Yogananda. It probably didn't start with Sri Yukteswar. Probably didn't start with Lahiri Mahashai, and it probably didn't start with Mahavtar Babaji. It carries on through that glorious lineage, but the truth and the essence has stayed the same through the ages and eons. Thus ends chapter 12.
There's one little thing I want to mention when I read up about YSS purchasing the old hermitage. They also bought a spot by the Ganges with a banyan tree where Babaji appeared to Sri Yukteswar, and they bought the property, and I think they're turning this also into a place of pilgrimage. So whenever those two are done, it's going to be a great place to visit and meditate and relive the history that's described here in the autobiography.
Yes, thank you for that reminder. Very true. So yes, in summarizing chapter 12, it was a very lovely chapter, and we spent, as Chris identified, more than 20 hours on it, probably close to 30 or 40 hours, and 4 months of meticulous research and study on our part. Hopefully you've enjoyed it as much as we did, listeners and viewers. But there's been so many, from my perspective, there's been so many minute lessons that we really just gloss over when you read it the first time, or read it with the intention of finishing this chapter, which is what I did when I read it. I must say I just enjoyed it, as opposed to really digging beneath the surface level of the words that are written. Obviously some lessons are clear and obvious, but there's probably more than 50% of them that require some introspection and some bookwork, even. So perhaps referring to the other scriptures, such as the second coming of Christ and the Bhagavad Gita and things like that. So but it's well worth the time and effort that it takes to do that, isn't it? We've learned some fantastic lessons for ourselves. And also there's been really good subplots, isn't there, that were in the chapter, none more so than that Kumar story. And as we mentioned, the Bhagavati's, Yogananda's father coming to the ashram, and also Sri Yukteswar visiting his own mother, and all these lovely little stories that really allow us to get to know our paramguru more and more, because we've got so much actually. There's Swami Satyananda's book on the biography of Swami Sri Yukteswar is, it might have 100 pages of just his life, but it's very factual. It's this happened. But here we kind of scratch beneath the surface of it all and see what the relevance of it is for us today, and for our teachings and all that kind of stuff. So it's really, really nice to have done that.
When we started the this chapter, let's say, of the Yogananda podcast, and we talked about, oh, well, what's your favorite? What are you most looking forward to? And we give our chapters and talked about it that way. I never would have really reflected on this chapter being as significant as it really was, in a sense. It not only is the longest chapter, but it's the longest chapter by far. And I sent you guys a screenshot of the Audible breakdown of all the chapters and how long it takes to read through each chapter. And really, we see that the shortest chapter is about 7 minutes 50 seconds in length, and the second longest chapter is 30 minutes and 30 seconds. But this chapter is a whole, 73 minutes. It's 1 hour and 13. So really, when we were breaking up this chapter, it was just revealing itself to me as to the importance that Yogananda placed on this time of his life with Sri Yukteswar, and all these stories that he's given us, the importance of them. But I love how it's, to my mind, it's like an homage to his guru, and to show his appreciation, his love and adoration for his guru. But like I said, coming into the chapter again and breaking down all the stories and all the lessons and the wisdom in it is just unreal, really. I'll give you 4 of my takeaways on the stories. Got 4 of them. And it probably won't come as a surprise, but the first one was the mosquito and the ahimsa stories. And I don't know if you've seen me swatting away some mosquitoes here. I'm back in Brazil. I'm in South America, and these mosquitoes and this story about the ahimsa we spent a bit of time on. That was eye-opening to me, and no more so having moved to South America. The weight loss story, I almost forgot it was in this chapter. That's where it came in. And when I got onto the path, I actually lost quite a bit of weight. So I'm already skinny enough, but I lost quite a bit of weight. I remember one of the devotees who passed, very fond of her. She told me at the time, Sri Yukteswar and Yogananda did this. You can do it too with the power of your mind. And we talked about that, the power of the mind and the miracle that, Sri Yukteswar was able to give or administer to Yogananda to heal this issue that I had. So that was really impactful for me reading that. I never managed to pull it off myself, but super interesting to see. And then the 3 visions, the boys' school in Ranchi, the USLA headquarters in Encinitas, and how Sri Yukteswar was able to pierce the thoughts. And what I noted was Mukunda, he said to Mukunda, "You gave me the permission. You gave me the right to do that." That shows the relationship that we have with the guru, the special relationship we have there. And then the curious case of Kumar and the lessons therein really stuck in my mind. One of the stories that kind of stuck with me after reading the Autobiography of a Yogi. But you could probably go on and on. It was a packed chapter full of amazing takeaways.
Oh, you're muted, I think.
This chapter was interesting because there was quite a build-up in the previous chapters to this one, right? He has been looking for his guru for a long time, and he's been running away to the Himalayas. He might still do that afterwards, but he has really been looking for a guru for a long time. And then he finally found the guru, and now you could have said, and the rest, he lived happily ever after or something, right? And just skip over it. But instead, he went into minute detail about things that happened there. I think we were all taken aback a bit. I mean, we knew the book before we started this podcast, but I mean, when we first read the Kumar story, it kind of had an impact on all of us. But even little things, how he treated others differently than the people who are in the ashram. The people who are in the ashram, they received really strict training, and people who came to visit, they got the 5-star treatment every time. So it was really something of an ego regime where your own ego gets kind of hammered every single day. And that was what Mukunda wanted, and he got it, and he explained it. And I feel like after this chapter, if you ever have questions about guru-disciple relationship, I feel like this chapter answers a lot of them.
Yeah. I also really loved, just throughout the whole thing, Sri Yukteswar's impeccable nature. He's just such an example to me, I can only speak for myself, of, how to live in the world and how possible it is to apply all those things in many circumstances. And, he's faced so many trying circumstances and people and topics, and he's really shown us the way. So I love this chapter for that, and that we get to see what he was really like.
Two really subtle points you just made in terms of Lauren, what you just said, see what he's really like, and Mike, you just said the guru-disciple relationship, for us to explore that in detail. I really loved that. It exposes how human our gurus are. And Phil Goldberg made this point, right, in when we interviewed him as part of the Awake podcast series, and he said, he went through such, Yogananda he was talking about, because he's written a biography of Yogananda that's famous, and he wrote the Awake film says it shows you how real his problems were and how similar they are to the problems we have. And so many people just think that he's an avatar, so his life was just plain sailing, but that's not the case. And that's also the case for Sri Yukteswar, right? We last 2 episodes we talked about legal challenges and things like that, which are you just wouldn't associate with an autobiography about our gurus. But in the other parts of this chapter, we were given little stories that shows that Sri Yukteswar was not just human, but he was really, really, really difficult to decipher. He was unravelable in many respects, and Mukunda, he also acknowledges that. So it's like he even writing in hindsight as Paramahansa Yogananda, he didn't work out all these mysteries, and he enjoyed those mysteries, and we also get to enjoy them in this chapter. There's no possible way we can see and work everything out, right? And there's lovely sections in this chapter that I now really appreciate, considering it's a parallel to life, isn't it? 99.9% of things in life, whether that be science or people or anything, or our lives even, we won't work out why things are happening, but we'll just have to accept it on good faith that God and gurus know what they're doing and know what's best for us, and we just play our role and do the best we can. And on that note, I think that ends a lovely chapter. Chris, what can we look forward to in the next chapter.
Yeah, we have a rather, in some way, unsurprising turn in this tale where the young man in Mukunda looks elsewhere outside of the hermitage to try to find answers. He goes on this misadventure, I think we can call it, where he goes to the Himalayas, or tries to head to the Himalayas despite Sri Yukteswar's advice, in search of really isolation. He kind of gets a bit fed up with all of his duties in the ashram, and he goes through this journey to find Ram Gopal, and we see a lovely picture of him in the book. And when he finally meets him, he has like many eye-opening experiences and insights. So we're going to talk about this search for God, the outer search for God versus the inner, the role of a guru. And Ram Gopal gives him a blessing, which is really fascinating to read. So we'll look at this sort of concept of super consciousness, and yeah, there's lots to unpack in the next chapter. So if
one lesson will be always bow before the statues of God. Yeah.
Yeah.
On that note, let us all bow in front of God and Gurus and see you all next time. Jai Guru.
Thank you.